attractive baseball mitt shape. It's sometimes sliced into steaks, but since we're talking about cuts you can't find in stores, we are of course keeping it whole. And to cook this one, we're gonna have a little fun. This is authentic spicy chili crisp, easily my favorite Asian condiment. It is packed with crunchy texture and deep savory umami, and we're gonna use it to marinate and almost cure our Denver roast overnight. Just like that, we are fully marinated and it looks and smells out of control. Onto the smoker, and after 4 hours, just take a look at that beautiful color. There's just so much texture from the garlic and chilies, and slicing into it, we have a perfect medium rare interior. This thing is just insanely juicy. Now, what I didn't tell you is that for the comparison, I also slow smoked a second Denver roast for a full 10 hours, basically treating it like a brisket. Denver's a unique cut that should taste good at medium rare and well done, so figured we put it to the test to find out which is best. I am extremely excited to taste. All right, guys, let's start with the medium rare whole Denver roast.
I don't like it.
It is not very good.
Chewy.
It's actually relatively lean. It's just quite tough. And I sliced it thin, I sliced it against the grain, but in that whole piece format, it just leaves a kind of slimy texture.
When you get to that interior meat, it's kind of like the center of a prime rib.
But worse. But I do have extremely high hopes for our slow smoked, like a brisket Denver roast. It's also terrible.
Really dry.
Doesn't really work either way, both medium rare or well done.
The thing is, it usually is amazing when cooked to medium rare when it's a small piece. But in whole roast form, I agree with you. Both of these are terrible. I think it's a D tier.
I also will give it a D.
I completely agree. It's gonna be a D.
Sadly, it's gonna be a D for Denver. Next up, this is a steak that's gonna blow your mind. This is a steak from the oldest cow I will have ever tasted at 7 years old. And on top of that, it's also Wagyu. Most cows are slaughtered at
Pasta bolognese. That's good. That's a great intro. We're gonna start by making our bolognese, or however you wanna say it. And the first step is to preheat our oven, since we'll be finishing this in there later. We'll start here with this pancetta. It's a cured pork belly that smells a little bit like prosciutto. I'm gonna start by slicing it right in half. This can be a little bit challenging, but if you roll it around as you cut it, or even cut sideways, just like this, it makes it a lot easier. We'll be left with 2 halves, which we'll then cut up into nice even stick shapes. Try to keep it all together, that'll make things easier for you. And we're cutting it this way because I'm eventually going to spin it around and slice it up into nice even cubes. If you can't find pancetta at your local grocery store, you can also use prosciutto or even bacon. Once that's fully chopped, I'm gonna move over to my burner where I've preheated a large, heavy-bottomed Dutch oven. And to this, I'm gonna add a splash of olive oil, and then in goes our pancetta. You'll wanna hear a good, clean sizzle like I did, but nothing too crazy. We're not trying to burn it. We're trying to get it nice and crispy and golden brown. So once I've evenly spread out all my pancetta, just like this, I'm gonna leave this here and move back to my cutting board to chop some vegetables. I'm gonna get the tears out of the way and start by chopping up my onion. First, I'll slice down vertically, but not all the way through the onion. And then I'll carefully slice into the sides of my onion with my knife, and then I'll chop all the way down the onion like this. If you need to, go ahead and run your knife through the onion a few more times, just to make sure there are no large bits. And then I'll follow this exact same process with the other half. Once again, just running my knife quickly through it to make sure there's no long or large chunks. I'll set this off to the side and then run back to check my pancetta. You'll see that some of it's already starting to get that beautiful golden brown color, but what's underneath it is the best part of all. This sticky golden brown part that's stuck to the bottom of my pot right now is the foundation of the flavor that we need in our bolognese. Once I've turned these all over to let them crisp up on their other sides, I'll move back over here and we'll chop up our celery. First, I'll trim off the tops. You could save those for a stalk or whatever you want. And then I'll chop it up into sections, trying to keep them all about an even size. And then, if I sit it up like this, I can chop straight down the celery to get 2 nice sticks like this. And when I cut this flatter piece into 3 pieces of its own, I have these nice celery sticks that I can cut into similar shapes to the onion. There can be a lot of knife work involved in a recipe like this, meaning you have to chop a lot of things. But this is one of those recipes where you cook to enjoy cooking, not just to make yourself a quick dinner. And dicing cutting up all these vegetables should be a fun part of that. As you can see, the last step here with the celery is to chop it up into a nice even dice. And when you're done, neaten up your workstation again and then go on back over to check on that pancetta. Oh yeah, golden, crackly, it's almost there. Some of the pieces, like this one here, still have a little bit of fat there that I want to render off and basically melt into our pot, whereas others, like this one, are ready to go. This is what we're going for. I'll give this one final quick stir, making extra sure that any of those fatty pieces are sitting at the bottom of the pot, and then move back on over to chop my carrots. With our carrots, I'm going to start by peeling them. If you're feeling a little bit lazy and your carrots are already super clean, I guess you could probably skip this step, but might as well give them a quick peel. It's also pretty satisfying. Clean peeled carrots are so pretty. One of my brothers grows carrots and all sorts of other things in the garden during the summers, but then he gets really mad at us when we try to take them and use them. Why is he growing them if he gets mad about it? I don't understand it. I hope he doesn't see this, but I'm just saying, I would love to use some of his carrots. Instead, I have to go get them at the grocery store. Once the carrots are all pretty and peeled, chop off the stems. You could also save this for a stalk if you want. And similar to the celery, I'm going to chop it up into thirds like this. Now be careful with this next part since carrots are round and can easily roll, but I found it's best if you stand them up like this and very safely chop down like that. That gives us nice flat pieces of carrot that we can work with, since our goal is to make all the chunks around the same size. We want these vegetables all timed the same when they cook. Once they all look something like this, I'm going to cut them however I can to make nice little matchsticks, and then eventually cut them into perfect little pieces. If your carrot cubes look anything like this, you did a great job. And now I'm just going to get chopping. Since it's taking me a little bit of time cutting all of these vegetables, it smells and looks like my pancetta is ready. So I'm going to take a break on this for a second, pop back over here, and I'm going to scoop all of these out. I want to leave as much of that fat in the bottom of the pot as possible. You can see that quite a bit of fat drains off as I lift these up, so you do want to shake that off before adding these to your bowl. And just make sure you've rendered off all that fat before you remove them, because otherwise, I do not like that texture of chewy fat. These are all super crispy. I'm gonna stop eating. I keep eating all of them, and I'm gonna have none left. One more. Let's get our meat. Here we have ground beef, and here we have ground pork. And together, this is a really nice bolognese blend. We're going to go straight into our hot pancetta oil with the ground beef, and then right away with that ground pork. And because it's so much meat, I'm gonna turn this up to medium-high and start to break it all apart. As I break it all up into tiny little bits here, I'm not only combining these two meats, but I'm also scraping the bottom of my pot to get all of those delicious bits of flavor that I pointed out to you earlier. That's all flavor that we developed from cooking that pancetta, and that is going to be hugely important in giving us a delicious sauce. I'll let this finish cooking while I come back over here and finish chopping up my carrots. It feels at this point like we've been cutting vegetables for way too long, but the nice thing is you can just jump back and forth to your stove. I think that's another cool thing about this recipe is that you can be really smart about how you do it, and that way you're rarely ever sitting around. If you're ever looking for a really fun dish to make with a bunch of friends or family or whatever, this is a great one, especially if you make homemade pasta. Everyone can get involved, the whole house is going to smell really good, and it's a really popular recipe that pretty much everyone I know really likes. These three vegetables that we just chopped make up what's called a sofrito. It's the Italian version of mirepoix, and it all means the same thing: onion, celery, and carrot. We still have just a little bit of chopping left with this garlic, but luckily it'll be nice and easy. I'm just going to rough chop this garlic. Our bolognese is going to cook so long that everything's kind of going to melt together by the end. So this garlic will be soft and tender. You don't have to do that classic tiny mince that you might normally have to do with garlic in other recipes. This will do just fine. If your beef looks cooked by now, you can go ahead and add your garlic and then all of your vegetables. Carrots, and I got my celery, and then finally I'll add in my onions. I'll hit these with a generous pinch of salt, then some fresh cracked pepper. Please don't use dry pepper ever. It pains me when I watch someone making such a beautiful recipe like this and then they use dried out pepper that has no more flavor and hasn't had flavor for the last 3 years. I'm still over medium heat here, maybe medium high. I'm gonna let all these vegetables sweat and get a little bit softer. You'll know you're good to move on to the next step when those onions start to get a little bit translucent. Oh no, how did I leave a big piece of carrot? While our vegetables cook, and I can't even begin to tell you how great this kitchen smells right now, we're gonna make what's called a bouquet garni. It's a French term. Really, it's just a bundle of herbs. And the reason we do it is so we can get all of the delicious herby flavor without having to dig them out afterwards. Instead, it's in one nice bundle like this. Really easy to do and a great technique that can save you lots of time in the kitchen. I'll set this aside and grab my wine. What's really cool here about this bottle of wine is that it's from the region in Italy that bolognese is originally from. And while we're not making a classic traditional Italian bolognese, and you'll see why in just a few moments here, it's still fun to use some of the ingredients that this dish might normally be made with. It's a great sound. I'm gonna measure out 1 cup of my wine, and before I pour it in, I'll give this one last little stir. Oh, and this is great that I'm showing you this. Those crackly bits on the bottom, those are bits that we need to scoop up again right now. So I'll pour in my wine. This is called deglazing. What happens here when we add a liquid is it makes it really easy to scrape off whatever's stuck at the bottom of the pot. And oftentimes what's stuck at the bottom of the pot is lots and lots of flavor. So as you can see, when I now pull this wooden spoon through my pot, the bottom is and should be totally clear. That means all the flavor has been swept up into that meat and into our vegetables. So we're continuing now to build layer after layer of delicious flavor. You'll know this step is done when you can drag your spoon through without any liquid closing in on the middle there. So while I let this finish up for a few more moments, I'm gonna come over here and open up my tomatoes. The fact that we're adding so many tomatoes here is what makes this an Italian-American recipe instead of the true traditional Italian bolognese. When it looks like just about all your liquid is gone, you can go ahead now and add in your tomatoes. Stand back so you don't get splashed. Then some beef stock, which I'm first gonna use to wash out my can of tomatoes so I get all that tomato goodness and don't waste anything. Then I'll add the rest of my beef stock. You could also use chicken stock if you want. It's okay if you're mixing different flavors of meat. It tastes just as good. And then we'll add in our milk. This is what would be used to make bolognese traditionally in Italy, so that's why we're adding some in here. Oh, it's so good. Then we'll add back our crispy pancetta that I just can't seem to stop eating, by the way. If you have one of those nosy people who keeps coming and grabbing stuff off your kitchen counter or eating stuff while you cook, hide it. I'm telling you right now, hide that, because they will eat all of it. And to finish things off, we'll add in our bouquet garni, which will sit on the top and drape all of its delicious flavor and essence in to our bolognese here. And once it comes up to a nice gentle simmer, we'll add on our lid, leaving just a small crack in there for anything to escape so that the sauce can continue to thicken up as it cooks. And then into the oven it goes for 3 to 4 hours. I know, it's a while, but you can drink the rest of your wine while you wait. While that cooks, we're gonna make some fresh pasta. Specifically, I'm gonna be making pappardelle. I'll start by making a well with my flour in the center of my cutting board. You wanna create a nice open space that's large enough to put in your eggs. Into this well, I'm going to crack in 2 whole eggs, and after the 2 whole eggs, I'm gonna grab 4 yolks. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, I'm gonna break up all of my egg yolks and start to whisk them inside this little makeshift bowl. And I wanna do this without breaking the edges of my flour. And if you don't have time to make fresh pasta, which I totally understand, you can certainly buy some dry pasta. But I just think there's something about fresh pasta that's unbeatable. And it's fun to do while your bolognese is cooking in the oven. Once you get a nice even mixture with your yolks, you can start pulling in some of that flour from the outside to slowly incorporate it. Don't move too quickly here, because if you do break through that well, you're gonna be chasing egg yolk all across your cutting board. Instead, just gradually pull and mix it in and watch that egg yolk become thicker and thicker and thicker, and eventually you'll have a good understanding of when you can fully mix everything in without it spilling. Now is the time when I like to bring in my bench scraper, which helps to pull everything together. Just so we don't forget about our sauce that's over there in the oven, you'll want to go over there about once an hour to check on it and give it a quick stir. Just make sure everything's cooking well, and then you can go back to whatever you were doing. Once you've brought it all together and it starts to kind of look like weird scrambled eggs, that's when we move in with our hands. We're now in the stage that I call the Italian grandma method. To finish up the dough, you'll want to scrape up literally everything from your cutting board. If you've done this correctly, it'll look spotless, just like mine right now. And then we'll begin to knead. Use your body weight to push down into the dough each time with the heel of your hand, and then use your other hand to bend the dough back up on top of itself. We'll continue this process for 5 to 10 minutes. Once your dough looks nice and smooth like this, we'll cover it up in plastic wrap or a plastic bag, whatever you prefer, and let this rest between 30 and 60 minutes before rolling it out. But I'm not gonna make you wait, so look, it's been rested. To roll out our fresh pasta, I'll start by lightly flouring it and then cutting it in half. Then I'm going to grab our bottle of wine and roll it a few times back and forth until it gets somewhat thin. The important thing here is that it's thin enough to roll through your pasta roller for the first time. So as long as it looks something like this, you're good to go. Now I'll turn on my machine and start feeding it through. Once you push it through the first time, that's when you can start tightening your machine to make the pasta roll out thinner. And as you do this and the pasta gets thinner and thinner, you don't want to poke your fingers through. You have to be very gentle. I'm going to go all the way to setting number 6 on my machine, and that's going to give us the perfect thickness for making our pappardelle. Once we finish rolling out our first sheet, I'm going to make sure it's well floured, and then I'll do the exact same process with my other sheet. But I'm going to do this one faster. One of the coolest parts about rolling out fresh pasta is how it automatically folds itself at the bottom like this. I've always found that to be really fun to watch. we're done with our machine. I'm gonna make this part fun and cut my own pasta here. I don't normally do this, but I thought it'd be really fun, especially since we have the time with our bolognese still in the oven. Once you have a good baseline piece, you can use that as a ruler to cut the rest. But this is the most fun part about cutting pasta by hand like this. It doesn't have to look or be perfect. So there's really nothing you could possibly do to mess it up at this stage now. And you know what? I'm not even gonna measure anymore. I'm just gonna start cutting. One of the fun things that I do every time I make pasta is also try to make it in different shapes. Sometimes I don't think people realize how many pasta shapes there actually are, and supposedly they've all been created for a reason. Some are better at holding sauce, some are just more beautiful, but you could also argue that some are pretty useless, and I probably wouldn't disagree. If you want to be really professional now, you can lay out a few of your pieces like this, make sure they're nice and floured up, and then you can kind of fold and roll them over the top of themselves so that they can sit all nice and ready to cook. Our pasta is done, and I've fast forwarded a little bit here so that our bolognese is also done. I'll shift this off to the side, then I'll grab a pan, you'll see why in just a minute, and finally I've got my hot salted pasta water. This is all gonna come together quickly. First, I toss in my pasta. I'll give that a nice stir, and that's gonna cook in literally seconds. Now, for this middle burner, I'll turn the heat to medium and add some of my amazing bolognese right into that pan. I'm especially gonna make sure we have plenty of liquid. Already, my pasta here is basically fully cooked, but we'll finish it off by tossing it right in here. This will allow our pasta to finish cooking while also absorbing some of that flavor from our bolognese. And if there weren't so many people watching right now, I'd probably eat this right out of the pan. But we gotta make it look nice. This smells out of this world. So now I'm simply gonna add on some of our meat and vegetables. I just had to literally close my mouth because I think I was about to drool onto the cutting board. And to finish it off, I'll give it a nice shower of Parmesan cheese. And that is how you make bolognese. It was so hard to walk away from that just now. I miss it already.
分をわきまえろ知れ者が
Everyone should make lasagna at least one time in their life. And if you do, I guarantee it will be the best lasagna you ever taste. As if lasagna wasn't already difficult enough, I'm gonna start by making my pasta sheets from scratch as well. To my flour, I'll add my eggs, then I'll whisk my eggs with a fork until they're fully combined. Once the eggs are fully combined, I'll start pulling in my flour from the outside of the well. But just remember, you don't have to make your pasta fresh for lasagna. I tend to make mine fresh because I think it gives more of a melt in your mouth texture, but the lasagna is gonna be good either way. My favorite tool for making fresh pasta is a bench scraper. It's quick, easy to use, versatile, and keeps your work surface nice and clean. If you're using the Italian grandma method like I am here, you eventually have to get in there with your hands. Just accept the messiness. Pull the dough together, gather up every last little crumb, and knead your pasta dough until it becomes nice and smooth. Oh man, I'm sweating. After a quick rest at room temperature, I'll cut it into 4 portions and then prepare it for the pasta sheeter by quickly rolling it out. Now I'll flour up my machine and my sheet of pasta and roll. I'll roll all our pasta out into nice long sheets, and then the only thing left will be to cut it. Part of the reason I like making fresh pasta for lasagna, aside from the actual difference in texture that you get, is just the fact that making fresh pasta is such a fun and beautiful process. I enjoy doing it, but it does make a mess of your kitchen, and it's not absolutely necessary for a delicious lasagna. Once you're done making your pasta, take the dish that you'll be baking your lasagna in, and you can use it to measure out how long your pasta needs to be. I'll actually just take my knife right in here and carefully trace each sheet of pasta. It's okay if they're not all perfect, but I promise you the lasagna is going to be just fine either way. You'll want to make sure you have enough pasta to make 4 layers when you go to put together your lasagna. So there's 1 layer, then 2 layers, then 3 layers, and 4. Nailed it. Now we'll take a baking sheet, cover it with a layer of parchment, add down one of the layers, then cover with another sheet of parchment, another one of the layers, and repeat until you've stacked all your pasta. This will just make sure nothing sticks together. Cover this all up with plastic wrap so it doesn't dry out, and then set this to the side. Let's move on to making our sauce. For the meat, we'll use a combination of hot Italian sausage and sweet Italian sausage. We don't want the casing from the outside of the sausages, so I'll split them all open with a knife and then pull out all of that meat. The only other things I need to prep are these fennel seeds, which I'll simply chop up and crush, as well as my onion. Chop your onion into nice fine bits. Then we'll also need 5 cloves of garlic, very finely minced. As always, I'm going to use my classic garlic trick. Garlic is my least favorite thing to cut in the kitchen. Your hands smell like garlic for like 3 days. All our ingredients are prepped. Let's move over to the stove. Heat on, medium to medium high. Start with a nice layer of olive oil into the bottom of your pot. More fat will come from the sausage, so we don't need too much. Then once the oil's hot, add in all of your Italian sausage. Spread it out quickly, but then it is very important that you leave it where it is for a few minutes. Just like searing a steak, we want to develop a crust. And once you feel like it'll have that nice golden crust, flip it all around and start to break it up into smaller smaller chunks. Don't be afraid to crank the heat all the way to high during this portion to get that nice crust. That right there is what I'm going for. Now grab your onion, put that right over all the sausage. Anytime I add onions, I hit them with a quick sprinkle of salt, and now we just want to let these soften for a couple minutes. The color on the sausage is exactly where I want it. That's gorgeous. You could actually follow this recipe, and even if you're getting it like 50% right, people are going to think you know how to cook. I think. Once your onion has softened, go ahead and add the garlic, a few red pepper flakes, then some fresh cracked black pepper, and our crushed fennel. Now let this go for a couple minutes, continuing to break up your meat as you stir. If you think about it, you don't want these big clumps in your lasagna. You want it to be nice and fine. A whole lasagna should sort of melt all together, not making a hamburger. And really make sure to get in there and scrape all those crispy bits off the bottom of your pot, because we all know that's where the real flavor is. Now don't look at me crazy when I say this, but we are now going to put an entire tube of tomato paste into our sauce. Tomato is packed with tons and tons of that umami flavor, so adding all this tomato paste to your lasagna will just give it that much more flavor. We want to toast off all of that tomato paste. Similar to making brown butter, this is an important step that develops flavor. Once that tomato paste turns a deep red, almost lighter brown, we'll add in some whole tomatoes, which I am then going to stand back from as I crush, because otherwise you will get hit right in the face with tomato juice. Once we add that liquid, do another scrape of the bottom of the pot. Any water or liquid is always going to help to knock all those crispy bits loose. As a final step, I'll throw in a bunch of basil leaves, which will add all of their amazing flavor as this continues to cook, and we'll let this cook uncovered for about an hour while we prep the rest of our lasagna ingredients. While our sauce cooks, there's only 2 more things we need to do. The first being making our ricotta filling. Some people just use normal ricotta, they don't do anything to it, but it's lots better if you just add a few small things to it. The first being a bit of Parmesan cheese, that also gives you some salt content, then a few cloves of garlic, which I am literally just gonna microplane right into the bowl, then some fresh cracked black pepper, a nice pinch of salt. Depending on the day, I even sometimes add a little bit of fresh nutmeg. But before we add our last ingredient, the eggs, I'm gonna stir it up now so I can taste it without the raw egg in there. Based on the taste, this needs a little more salt. I do like it extra salty. It doesn't actually taste extra salty once it's in the lasagna. And now we can crack in both eggs. Just give this a good mix until fully combined. And now just one last thing to do. Grating this whole block of mozzarella cheese. Notice that I'm grating it the long way, such that I get the longest strands of cheese possible. Transfer that to a bowl and we can assemble. The layering process is fun because you have to get down a bit of a pattern, but once you get into the rhythm, it's easy. The order for layering will be the same throughout the whole process. We'll start with a thin layer of red sauce all across the bottom to prevent the pasta from sticking or burning. And notice that I'm really pushing this sauce all the way to the edges. A common mistake people make is layering too much in the center and not enough on the sides, and then your lasagna might be a little lopsided. Next, after I get off any of that excess flour, I'll place down 2 of my pasta sheets. Feel free to trim them a little extra if needed, and press those firmly down on the bottom. Next, do a nice even layer of your ricotta cheese. Oftentimes it can be really helpful to spread it out using an offset spatula. That'll help you get it nice and even. And for our last layer, a light coating of mozzarella and a quick dusting of Parmesan cheese. And then we just repeat. Sauce, then pasta sheets, then ricotta filling, and then both of our shredded cheeses. As I'm making this lasagna, one thing I'm being very, very careful of is keeping everything extremely nice and level. That way, as I build it all the way up, I know that structurally, it's going to hold together really well. Go like that once in a while too, and just make sure everything is nice and flat. This is a construction site. You gotta get in there perfectly flat. Sometimes your pasta sheets might not fit perfectly if you're using end pieces, if you made it homemade. So what you can do is you can sometimes stretch things out just a little bit, but you can also cut, kind of just piece things together using some of the scraps like a jigsaw puzzle, and that'll work for this layer. When I first made lasagna as a kid, I probably just layered everything however I felt like it. But this order that we're doing is technically the correct way to spread. It's a little tricky to explain why, but if you don't trust me, trust the Italian grandmas who've been doing it forever. Okay, last one. Once you've placed down your final layer of pasta, add some streaks of red sauce. Also make sure to tuck it towards the edges to get that really nice caramelization there too. On the top of a lasagna, I do think that the messier it looks, the better it tends to turn out in flavor. Notice how I'm not being that careful anymore. This is all gonna melt together however it wants anyways, so I kind of like the top of my lasagna to look like a modern painting before it goes into the oven. And then cover all that with a thick layer of mozzarella. I saved about half of all my mozzarella just to put on the top. I'm even happy having some of it drape over the edges of the pan like this. And last, a good coating of Parmesan cheese, especially all along the edges so it gets nice and crispy. Get a sheet tray, put your lasagna over the sheet tray. Things are gonna spill and goop over the side. And finally, into the oven. Just looking in the oven, the reason I can tell this is going to be a good lasagna is because of all those layers. Every layer is packed with flavor, and as it bakes, you'll slowly see all those layers mixed together. And when it's finally golden brown on the top, we can pull it out. I never put on oven mitts. When I put these on and I look like a lobster, I'm not messing around. Seriously, no, I'm not joking about this. That's very exciting. Listen to the bubbles. We've got these crispy laced edges of Parmesan cheese, beautiful melty, bubbly, crackly mozzarella over the top, and then lots and lots of layers of gooey lasagna goodness. How could you not love this food? Most people now would put this on a plate. I'm not most people. I've said it before and I'll say it again. A homemade Crunchwrap Supreme is one of the best tasting things you can make in your kitchen right at home. We'll start by cooking our beef, and for that I'll go into a pan over medium-high with a bit of oil, then into the pan with my beef, and I'll spread it all out, leaving some space in between so it can get nice and crispy while I come on over here to chop up my onion. I'll slice this in half, then chop it all up into nice small and even pieces, and I'm even going to run my knife through there a couple more times just to make sure no large onion chunks exist, and once that's fully chopped, I'll move on over to my jalapenos. But don't throw away this juice, there's lots of flavor in here, and we're going to use it. I'm going to chop my jalapeno up to about the same size as my onion, and once they look similar, I'm going to go check on my beef, make sure we got some nice browning happening on the bottom here, and after checking that we got some nice flavor and some good browning on the bottom, I can add in my onion and my chopped jalapenos. Once that's in, I'll hit it with some salt. That's going to start drawing out that moisture and flavor from those onions, and then we'll stir things around for a few minutes to break up all that beef and also soften the onion in the process. Remember, since all of this is going to be the filling of a Crunchwrap, we can't have any pieces of beef that are too large. You'll want to make sure they're in nice, small chunks. It's perfectly okay for them to have some texture, but you do want them to be pretty small. Once all that beef is broken up, I'm going to grab a few spices. These are the ones I picked out, but you can certainly use your own spice blend if you want. And I'm going to season this with some smoked paprika, a little bit of garlic powder, some nice ground cumin. That's one of the spices that's going to give our beef that classic taco night flavor and smell here. A little bit of chili powder, and to finish, some fresh cracked black pepper. Once again, I'll stir this around to fully combine and toast off some of those spices. But then, before they burn, grab that jalapeno liquid and a little bit of extra water, and together, we're going to add these both in to deglaze. That's going to temporarily halt the browning process, and the jalapeno juice is supposedly a trick they use at Taco Bell to give their beef more flavor. Once it gets to a stage where there's just a little bit of liquid left on the bottom and you start to see these big bubbles that are poking out from all the different holes, turn off the heat and shift this to the side. Now that we've finished making our beef, we're going to make a few tostadas, and what that means is that we're going to fry off a couple of corn tortillas. To do that, I'm going to add a nice layer of oil into the bottom of a pan, and once the oil begins to shimmer and that gets nice and hot, I'll add in my corn tortillas one at a time, and then just use whatever utensils you have in your kitchen to keep it as flat as possible while it cooks. Once you feel that it's fully fried and crispy, go ahead and set it off to the side, where you'll want to hit it immediately with a pinch of salt. While I repeat this process with the rest of my tortillas, I like to play a little game to see which one I can get to be the flattest. I don't think that one's going to win. But this one right here, Mike, that is a very flat tostada. Although I do have one more chance. See how much better they got as we kept cooking? It's fun to play little mini games while you cook. With this last sprinkle of salt, our tostadas are done. To make our cheese sauce, we're going to keep it simple. It's not going to be as easy as going into the supermarket and buying a cheese sauce, but this will only take us just a few minutes. I'll start by grating up some cheddar cheese and then unwrapping a few slices of this classic American cheese. I still can't believe that this is actually cheese. Cheese should not do this. That's not cheese. And once all that's ready to go, I'll come over to a small pot, and then over medium heat, I'll add a little bit of butter. Make sure your flame's not too hot. We don't want to color the butter in any way here. And once that's fully melted, I'll add in a little bit of flour, and then whisk this together to make what's called a roux. Once it turns a nice dark blonde color like this, I'll whisk with one hand while pouring in a little